Hello and welcome to another episode of the To Baldly Go podcast. And thank you for joining us on our mission to explore strange new worlds, to seek out new life and new civilizations, to baldly go where so many have gone before. My name is Aaron, and I am joined by my wife Abbie and our friend Nate as I take my first voyage through the galaxy with the crew of the Starship Enterprise. This week, we're discussing the final two episodes of Star Trek The Original Series, Season 2, Bread and Circuses, and Assignment Earth. Mr. Sulu, set a course. Ahead, Warp Factor 3.
Oh man. All right, let's talk original series because we got to get through this.
All right.
I am over it.
Are you over it? I'm over
I
it
am
too.
over the original series. I am
It's really
sorry. All of
horrible,
our
brutal.
listeners, all one of you, mom, probably. I'm sorry. I am over this
Hey, Aunt Jody's going to
series.
listen to this. She said she would.
Okay, thanks, Jody. Um, I'm just the plot points are the same every single episode. And the more
More and
episodes we
more.
get into this, the more they're getting political, which is weird, but not subtle like they were when we first started season one, where it's just like these subtle things going on. Now it's like we're just marching that American flag right across the TV screen, or we've got just it's just random. It's random. And I can see why they struggled to keep it going because they made it. I mean, what was this last episode we watched? Cuban Missile Crisis. My God, they literally said it. I can't even remember what the words were, but anyway, I'll go back. Aaron can start us off for real here, but it was brutal. It was brutal sitting down to watch
Lots
these.
of
I just
blunt
could not get
objects.
into it.
Just
Huh?
lots of blunt objects.
Yeah. And honestly, you kind of took a number of my notes from my basically season 2 recap. But yeah, basically we've seen these episodes before, so it feels. First one we watched was Bread and Circuses, where it was the Roman Empire on an Earth-like planet in the 20th century, but it was a TV show. In the way they did the gladiator games.
But again, we have
Yeah.
like the gladiator thing happening.
Yep. I wrote in a couple different spots. They were dealing with somebody else who had potentially violated the Prime Directive, and then they talked about how he didn't because he assimilated into their culture. So that is kind of the antithesis of violating it, or so they would try to make it seem. But that was a lot like the episode we watched last week, the Omega Glory, uh, where the guy was kind of taking over and changing it, and then Kirk had to defend the Prime Directive and reset everything to make it right again. And then you've got them forced to fight, just like in Arena and Gamesters of Triskelion. And yeah, it was just, I really wanted to like the episode. I wanted to like both of this week's episodes, and I'm guessing I gave them higher ratings than either of you did. I gave this first one a 6. I thought it was okay. Um, and I feel like this episode, kind of like some of the episodes we watched last week and just recently, it started out much stronger than it ended. And by the end, it was kind of like, okay, what's going on here? Like, what are we even doing? Um, yeah, I don't have a whole lot to say. I mean, kind of an interesting concept. What if the Roman Empire never fell? And then that, yeah, beyond
Yeah.
that, it was just kind of like, okay. What did you rate the episodes, Nate? I'm guessing Abbie gave it maybe a 4 on the high end.
I gave first now it's disappearing on me. Hang on. There we go. I gave it a 5.
Okay.
So
I
yeah, slightly less than you.
Yeah, I felt I could have gone 5 on it too. Early on, I was thinking it felt like, oh, it could be a 7, because I felt like it started out decently and then just kind of fell apart. Maybe if I had seen this one before Omega Glory, I might have liked it better. But it's another scenario where it, like Abbie said, it feels like we've seen this before. I mean,
That's an
some
interesting
different
point.
details, but the story's the same, but not in a necessarily good way.
Yeah.
Like there are, as I've been thinking through a lot of this stuff and the stories that they tell and just stories in general, a lot of stories are basically the same story, just told in a different way with some different details, but a lot of similarities between the stories. And sometimes it works, and sometimes it's the end of season 2 of the original series, where it just doesn't really work. And more, especially as this season went on, it's kind of like, okay, I can see why it got canceled.
Mm-hmm. I can't wait, honestly, for us to get to the next episode. And I'm not saying we should skip ahead, but simply because I know some of the trivia for this episode, and I'm kind of curious. I don't know if either of you have looked up the trivia yet, but I'll be curious to know
a tiny bit, but not much.
Okay. I will just, and not to skip ahead, but we talk about how it, I don't think any of us were super impressed with either of the episodes this week.
Yeah.
There's a bit of trivia for the next one that I'm curious to know your thoughts on it once we get there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I would agree. Started out stronger, although even from the beginning, I don't think it super grabbed me. I think as soon as I saw Gladiators, I kind of went, ugh. Like here we go again. They had some funny lines. I thought McCoy's line of just once I want to land someplace and say, "Behold, I am the Archangel Gabriel," was really funny.
That was, I think, probably the biggest positive in this episode was that there was a lot of good bickering between Bones and Spock.
Yes.
That was kind of fun, and it was good, and it was like strong. But that can only carry an episode so far. And yeah, and that was kind of all this episode really seemed to have. I think it's a forgettable episode. Yeah, my note after I finished it, I just said, not sure about this episode. Nothing particularly bad, but nothing really great either. Said a solid 6, just okay. Feels like we've seen most of it before, just different costumes. Forgettable episode. It was interesting in that it had some of the most direct discussion yet of the Prime Directive, but or so it seems, and they called it that. And they talked about how it applies there, why it wouldn't apply in certain ways.
Yeah, I mean, I guess to me it was kind of a forgettable episode.
Yeah.
All right, well, here we go. Okay, so what have I got here on my thing, on my commentary on the things and stuff? All right, so I do have some comments.
Yes.
As much as I am bored with the show, or this season, I should say. So here's some of the things I said, and I'm going to go rapid fire on my comments on these. They alluded to a third world war with 37 million dead. They talked about World War I, World War II, and gave the death tolls for each one of those. I said, same plot. We had this, not only do like the same like backwards, like retelling of history on a different planet, somehow completely the exact same as if it was our planet. But then we also have, equally as strangely, we have Kirk as a really poor judge of character. So this is, I think, our third episode where we have someone where Kirk's like, I know that person. He would never do this. And all of a sudden, he's this bad villain. He's he's Hitler, or he's Caesar's, trigger warning bitch. It's just horrible that Kirk is such a bad judge of character for the position that he's in. You'd think he'd be like, yeah, he was a little sketchy when I knew him, so let's keep an eye out. We don't know what's going on. Let's keep a solid yellow alert. we don't really know how this is going to shake down. This dude wasn't trustworthy then. Kirk seems to trust everybody and doesn't ever say like, I had bad feelings about this at that point. He likes everybody until he hates them. There is no middle ground. Yeah. And he likes them until they like wrong him in the episode, which is crazy.
And this guy like washed out of the academy. And they don't really say why, but just he washed out and ended up in, you know, the merchant service.
Right.
You get the impression that doesn't really happen, right?
Right. He definitely made it one of those things. I don't know how to make my phone make less noise. I'm sorry. Yeah. So that was kind of like, you got more the impression of, well, I can't believe we do that. Our captains know better. It's like, what? No, we keep having this recurring theme. All the humans are messing up on and causing all these conflicts on other planets is what it kind of boils down to, where it's like, wow. And that brings me to my next point of the power of future knowledge holds so much power in these episodes that we've seen over and over again. One person knowing just a little bit about future technology or even, you know, history, but having more technology now influences this entire world. When I say world, it took me a while to figure out to myself that it's not just this city. Okay. We're talking these planets. So that'll be like someone showing up on Earth and being like, hey, we live in space. We used to have a Hitler, and all of the Earth as a group decides to do Hitler and to do this Nazi Germany world thing. We're not just talking like country, we're talking globally. And the impact of one person on a global level is what we keep seeing happen on all these planets. And I don't know if I believe it, that would be the case. Like one person can enact that much change in that short of a time frame. Or my other take on it was, is technology that powerful that it can literally rewrite on a global level that quickly? And I don't know. And it also made me think then, okay, well, if you have the extra knowledge and it joins with a society that's immature, then that's when we have those bad outcomes. If the society was mature and we gave them knowledge and technology they may not have, then they'd be fine and they prosper, right? Yep. If they're immature and you couple that with knowledge they're not ready for, then we have these catastrophes on the global scale. So I thought that was kind of like,
I know the answer to this, like from a real answer perspective, but like here you have another episode with that influence of Earth, right? And it's not entirely because of Merrick. Like there was a lot of that influence that pre-existed before he got there. But we have yet another episode where we find a very Earth-like culture following a very Earth-like path. Whether it's Romans or Nazis or gangsters or, you know, whatever, for various reasons. And the thought that kind of popped into my head while I was watching it is, why does Earth have such a big impact on the overall culture of the galaxy? And I know the answer is because
such an egocentric review of the world.
And they had a limited budget and they couldn't create aliens every week and yada, yada, yada. But
did I miss something that this was influenced by Earth, or was it just a parallel development?
Parallel development.
So that is not influenced by Earth even a little. It's just saying that they were developing in the same way. It's no different than a lot of technological development where two people in completely different places come up with the same thing in relatively the same time.
But my point still stands, because even if it's not this exact episode, there have been many, many, many episodes like that at this point, right?
Yet you're using this episode to...
I don't care. I thought of it this
No, and no, he's right, because they do go for it. At the very end, that was my like, oh, seriously? Caesar... He's the sun, not the sun, not the sun in the sky, the sun.
That was kind
Christ. Of I was like, oh my God. We got the double nod both to the Christianity thing that we've been like very undercurrenting this entire season or series. But now we're just like, in case you didn't get it on the previous episodes, y'all, we're being too subtle. Here you go.
Well, it's funny because
right here.
I don't remember if I mentioned this last week or not. And if I did, just edit this whole thing out. But I was watching a video more about, you know, some of the more underrated episodes of Star Trek as a franchise. And a couple of the episodes that we've watched recently kind of fell into this list. And I disagreed with it, by the way, because I still think they're awful. But one of the things that came up as a historical point was there was kind of a tipping point where early on in the show, Gene Roddenberry was absolutely against any kind of religious references of any kind. Christianity, Judaism, Hinduism, Buddhism, like name your religion. It just, that was not a thing he was interested in entertaining. And
yeah, we talked about that too.
It was like one day he just decided, I don't care anymore, just do it. And there's like this hard like shift from we don't acknowledge religion to look at all these religious references. And I think we saw that transition happen in the middle of season 2.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree that we did see that, because I remember even having the conversation that I had heard he was very anti-religion in general, and basically acted quite a bit in the early run of the series like it was a non-factor in anything, which is kind of, I think, an interesting take, because like it or not, it has been hugely a factor in human history. So to try to pretend that it's not a factor is, I think, almost a bit disingenuous. But needless to say, they did, and it worked in the way they were doing it, because they were just like, this isn't what our stories are about. Our stories are about other things. But then I think, I know I grew up in, say, the church, where everything was made to be about church at times, and the creative output, we'll say, is maybe lacking in, or at the very least, not lacking in quantity, but lacking in quality. And we can see that a bit here, where there's a definite drop off in the quality, especially, it seems, and again, I'm kind of going to my recap of the season notes, but I remember talking at the end of season 1, it was like they had really hit their stride in the middle of season 1. They were just like, this is what we are, and this is what's working. And then in season 2, they were just like, all that stuff that worked, great, but now we're gonna do other stuff. And it just, so much of it,
so we're gonna do that now.
So much of it didn't work. And in this one, it made me think of the South Park arc called Cartoon Wars. I don't know if you've seen that or not, but
no.
Cartman is offended by a joke on Family Guy and how unfunny it is. And so he goes to their offices, and what he finds is that their jokes are basically created by manatees in a big aquarium knocking random beach balls with random words out of a pool. And whatever they knock out is kind of a word association that they turn into a joke.
So this is South Park making fun of Family Guy? Did I catch that right?
Yep.
That's humorous in of itself, but okay.
It's brilliant. But then it felt like this episode is a bit like that. It was like, all right, what are we going to do this week? All right, we're going to have them go to an Earth-like planet. Okay, we've kind of done that. And it's the Roman Empire. Oh, cool. We'll see him in the Roman Empire. But it's the 20th century. All right. Well, we've seen him in the 20th century, and it's a TV show. Like 4 just random
we have
things.
Someone that you knew beforehand that brought us there, that showed him how to do this.
Yeah, just like 4 random things that they're just like, all right, we'll try all these.
It's Mad Libs.
Yeah.
Pick a location, pick a time, pick out. It's Mad Libs. It is a Mad Libs episode of Star Trek.
Yep. And that's the title of this episode.
So I'll say this, though. I find myself feeling very guilty about having these feelings about this season, because I really wanted to enjoy it, considering it's the foundations for so many things that I do enjoy. And I'm actually getting so afraid that when we get to the later things that I, again, haven't watched in a very long time, but appreciate, I'm afraid I'm not going to like them anymore as an adult watching them versus as a younger person watching them. And so I'm getting a little nervous, being like, I feel guilty essentially shitting on Star Trek when, you know, I'm in a closeted Trekkie most of my life. And then secondly to that, like, oh God, have I changed enough that I don't like it anymore? And it's me? It's not just these episodes. And it's gotten to the point with these ones where it's like, it takes me some effort to be like, all right, I had to watch these today.
I
And
understand that.
I feel
Now,
bad about it.
I
But-
wonder. Go ahead.
I guess I come from maybe the flip side of I don't have that worry, Abbie, because I have watched everything else recently enough because I am a gigantic Star Trek nerd that I have been through most of the major series in the last
Yep.
3 years.
I was gonna say, so we're not talking the new episodes that are coming out now.
No, but I've been
what
like in the
what
last 2
was the
years-
last season of a Star Trek series you watched, not the original series, and when was it?
And not one of the new release ones.
Yeah, that's what I'm
seriously,
saying.
that?
Yeah. I'm
Uh,
assuming it's a season of DS9
No,
last.
it was actually Voyager.
Was I right on the timing?
What do you mean the timing?
I said it. I'm assuming it was a season of DS9 last week.
No, it was a season of Voyager, and it was probably 3 months ago now, because
Okay.
I've been too busy watching everything else that we have. I actually, it's kind of nice to not do this last night like we planned, because I got to catch up on Billions and catch up on Ahsoka and like all the other shows that are happening right now that I have not watched because I haven't had time. So no, it's been a couple of months since I've watched, what I would call kind of the, first wave, maybe second wave Star Trek stuff, right? If we really think of us being in the third wave right now in the original series is first wave. It's been a couple of months, but with Voyager, I was kind of going through a watch through that again. It was DS9 not much longer before that. Now, to be fair, even last week I was watching like clips of episodes of DS9 on YouTube. Does that count? That definitely happened in the last 7 days.
That's what makes us so great. We've got the non-Trekkie, the like closeted Trekkie, and the full-on Trekkie.
Oh yeah, there's
It's
just
like
something
right there.
reminded me of
I have a
went down the
I have
right.
a feeling by the end of this, I'm going to be a bigger Trekkie than Abbie.
I think you're
Really?
probably right. I believe it.
If you say that, but I really was enjoying the Strange New Worlds, and I really enjoyed Picard. So
Still,
I'm
I
sorry,
just-
Jerry Ryan looks amazing. Does that
Yeah,
woman age?
but-
My
You wanna talk
God.
about a woman
We
who's
can all
aged
hope
well.
to
Holy
look that
crap.
good. I saw
That's
something
cool.
come up on like my
No.
Facebook like promotions, and it was like Voyager, and it had Jerry Ryan on it with whoever plays Neelix. I can't remember his name. The
Ethan
actor.
Phillips, who has aged like horrible leather.
Well, it was them back at Voyager time, right? It was
Okay.
just their picture, like off scene or whatever, off camera, but they were still that age. And it was like, you look at her there and you look at her on Picard and you're like, how is a human woman
Holy crap.
aged this way? And it's not like she got a ton of work done or anything like that. She's just got to be one of the most stunning women.
Yeah,
In the
she has great
world.
genetics, that's for sure.
And she is easy on the eyes, and she's such a good actress too. Like, I'm sorry. Love my Jerry Ryan. She's my favorite person, I think, in the series. Kate Mulgrew is awesome for a whole different reason, but Jerry Ryan, props to you, my friend.
The other thing I'll say about Kate Mulgrew that I didn't really realize until I think last summer or the summer before, Kate Mulgrew is a really, really talented writer. She's
Really?
written a couple of books now. I listened to one of them. She's written her own memoir of kind of like her life, which is not the one that I've listened to or read. But she also wrote a memoir of her parents. It's called Learning to Forget. Because her mother died of Alzheimer's, and so she was kind of like the full-time caregiver of her mother
Oh wow.
in the final years, and going through all that, which we all know is a very difficult situation to be in. But she talks a lot about like her relationship with her parents growing up and kind of the things that she went through, and it's divided into kind of two halves, where one half is her relationship with her father over the course of his lifetime or their lifetime together, and then the other one from the perspective of her and her mother. And it is really good. And then she narrates the audiobook. So if you want to listen to it, like literally in her words, it's well worth it. A very talented writer. That's way off track, but it just made me think of it.
That's how good this episode was.
Yeah, we don't even want to talk about the episode.
We'll just talk about Voyager.
All right. I'm
cool
going to bring it back. I've got a few more notes. We're going to briefly state we had a really excellent yuck factor with Kirk and a slave who said she was a slave. We're just going to say it there. Like, Kirk, my man.
Yep.
I thought better of you than that one. Someone literally sent you a prostitute who said it was under duress to you, and you were like, I'm good with it. And not only did he say that, later on, when the guy says, because you're a man, I gave you the last moments as a man. And Kirk said, thank you for that.
It's such a bad episode.
Oh, that yuck factor for me. That was like, that was worse.
I don't think I got a rating for
that was yuck.
I'm going to drop this one down to a 5.
Oh, you forgot about the whole, okay.
No, I'm just saying, just in general, it was just, like I said, I thought
I don't think you should get to change your ratings after being talked to. It's supposed to be your unbiased opinion. I know,
we do that all the time.
Crazy.
It's entirely subjective. We've said it before. It's like, whose line is it anyway? The rules are made up and the points don't matter.
Love it.
Okay. So, interesting actual thing, though, they did make a commentary on. And I'm curious what your guys' take is on it. So, did you notice how, I can't remember what the other captain's name was, the merchant captain?
Merrick
kept getting demoted by proconsul because he didn't stand up for himself. He wasn't a man. So though he wanted him to do everything that he said or risk his entire crew, because he agreed and because he went along and subjected his crew to everything that the proconsul wanted, Merrick was no longer a man. He made multiple references to that. He dismisses him and says, you're not a man and you can leave. You don't want to hear what men are talking about. Yep. You can leave.
I do remember
him from the room. And then later on, he makes a comment about, you're not a man any longer. You don't get a say in this, or something along those lines when it comes to that. Or he references also when Kirk is standing up for himself when they're about to, they're at the iron bars and the guns are pointing on him. Proconsul makes a comment to Merrick that you're not a man, so you wouldn't understand this. So it was very interesting, the use of the word man, because I think he meant brave and strong. They're probably better terms for that. Like, you were weak, I think is very much what he meant. You were weak and didn't stand your boundaries, but he used the term man for it very much as a thing. And that was obviously very cultural at that time. I get that. But it was a very interesting commentary. Like, the guy tried to save his crew by giving them up for it and what the guy wanted. But at the end, even though that's what proconsul wanted him to do, by doing it, proconsul didn't respect him for it at the end.
Yeah.
So
there's another part
I got.
that made me think of, that bothered me too, which was the whole, Kirk, you're going to tell your entire crew to beam down so that they can be gladiators. And obviously Kirk in Kirk fashion finds a way to get out of that by, picking the communicator and saying condition green. And, that doesn't mean what everyone thinks it means. And which is kind of a cool thing in of itself of like, hey, we're going to have a code that you think is good, but it's actually bad, so that you can say it covertly. But what on earth did they think they had as leverage against Kirk that was going to convince him to call up to the ship and say, all right, everyone, beam on down. Like, you guys are the next contestants on the Gladiator.
I thought they explained it because he wasn't going to be telling him, come on down, because this is what you're going to do. They were telling him to say, come on down. We need your assistance down here, and then basically lure them into a trap. And how leverage? They were trying they didn't have any leverage. His two best friends.
I don't believe for an instant.
I thought that's what they even said in the episode. Like,
yeah, I was kind of okay with that.
Call them down because you don't want your two best friends to be killed.
Not even two best friends. Obviously, at that time, you're sending down your top people. It's your A team that goes down right away. So it was like, do you want to
But
sacrifice 2 people to have the rest have a chance to live or not?
Now,
you know what I mean?
it may be a silly point that they're making, but I think they addressed in the episode the question you're bringing up.
I don't believe for an instant that Kirk would sacrifice his entire crew to save his 2 friends.
And he didn't.
Right. But that was the leverage they thought they had against him. And I think that's dumb.
Well, yeah, they tried to take on Kirk. That in and of itself would be dumb.
Replace Kirk with any decent human being.
Like the weak guy that brought his crew down and did exactly what they wanted him to.
Not a decent human being, right? I don't know. That just, I didn't like it. I thought that was dumb.
And once again, Gene Roddenberry is a writer on this one.
Yeah, his episode.
Gene can't write.
What I'm seeing here too, and it's kind of interesting given our earlier conversation about how as season 2 progressed, they just kind of said screw it with certain things and just embraced whatever. This was the first episode filmed for season 2. But the second to last one aired.
Do they give any reason why it was second to last aired? Is just that's how it worked out, or
who knows? That's all it says on that little bit of trivia. But I mean, yeah, for whatever reason. I mean, it seems like they just kind of had, since it's not like the episodes are necessarily serialized, they could just kind of air them whenever. So maybe they were taking their time editing, or who knows, or just shelved it because they had better ones ready to go and they just kept waiting and they're just like, all right, let's do this one now. Who knows? Maybe I'll find out when I read the Making of Star Trek book.
So one of these, so apparently the multiple parallel Earth planet things in the series was deliberate. They fully knew they were doing so many of them because they were saving money.
Well, I know the real world answer for all of that, right? It's just the in-universe answer is what alludes.
Way less exciting.
Bugs me. Yeah.
So here's the fun part of this episode. I really liked it. I wish I wrote down the entire clip, but it was when McCoy was thanking Spock for saving his life. And that's when, he started fighting stopped fighting his own gladiator to fight McCoy's, and, nerve pinched him and he fell down. McCoy's really awkwardly saying, Spock, we haven't really gotten along. Yeah. And Spock's like, Doctor, I'm trying to break us out. Could you speed it along here? And McCoy goes, I was trying to thank you for saving my life. And Spock says something along the lines of, oh, that's right. Humans need to show gratitude so they feel better about themselves. Well, whatever I may think of your relative skill as ship surgeon, we still need you.
It's just,
which is why it was the logical choice to save you. And it was like such a backhanded you're welcome. It was like, I love it. That was the only redeeming part of this episode for me, was the like, as far as the character goes, the unintentional, complete just bashing that Spock did to McCoy. Completely just what you'd expect from
unintentional?
Spock. Yes, I think that one was.
I maintain that Spock knows exactly what he's saying all the time, and that is his own version of an emotional reaction to things, even though he would never acknowledge it.
So yeah, I think again the kind of banter and bickering between Spock and McCoy is what I thought was the strongest part of this episode. But I think we're seeing more and more they're almost using those fun character traits and features, whatever, almost using them like a crutch in these episodes, and like they can where it feels a bit like lazy writing, lazy filmmaking, TV making, whatever you want to say, because they're just like, all right, let's have Spock be like extra Spock today. And some of it works, some of it's good. I laughed when Flavia said, what do you call those? He said, I call them ears. He said, trying to be funny? Never.
Yeah,
like,
that was funny.
That's funny, but that's like super Spock being like extra Spock. And I can almost see that and be like, okay, I can see why in the mid 1970s Leonard Nimoy wrote a book called I Am Not Spock, because he was probably like, all right, I'm sick of doing these same little catchphrases or
Yeah.
whatever it might be. But then I can also see how he might come back around to embracing the character that more or less made him. But I can see that they're going a little like, all right, we know we can do just some Spock being Spock stuff, and that'll fill some time. And it almost feels like that's it. That's what it is.
Right.
It's just a filler. Now, some of it works, but a lot of it starts to not work. And it makes me think of, like, I loved the first Pirates of the Caribbean movie, thought it was great, and loved all the Jack Sparrow stuff. But then the second Pirates of the Caribbean movie was like just what they thought was the best part of the first one, but drawn out for 2.5 hours. And it didn't work at all because it didn't feel organic, maybe. And I think we're starting, we are at this late in season 2 really seeing that with some of these things. Now, I did think the banter, the bickering did work pretty well in this episode, but
It generally does, but yeah, I think your point is excellent, and that's what kind of bolstered this episode up, and not in a good way, right?
yeah, like it worked, but it wasn't enough to carry everything.
Yep.
But I'm good leaving this one behind and probably never even remembering that it existed.
6 months from now, if you say bread and circuses, what is it about? I'm not going to remember.
I mean, I would probably say gladiators,
I
but
don't think I'd even get that far.
all right.
Yes.
So the final episode of season 2, Assignment Earth, which was another one that I felt was pretty strong at the beginning, but by the end I was kind of whatever on it.
It drew itself out for so long.
Yep. So I gave this one a 6. I don't think I'm going to drop it down to a 5. Maybe I could be convinced if it's that terrible, but I really wanted to like this one more. But on this one, I almost felt like it was a good episode or story on its own, but other than the presence of Kirk and Spock, there was nothing that really made this a Star Trek story.
Yep.
It was just a story, and it was a fine story, but and I would give it probably a higher rating as a standalone story, but as the season finale of a series of Star Trek, it's just like, what is this?
So, are you ready for my bit of trivia? That
Yes.
might make more sense. This show is meant to be a spinoff.
So what? Oh, that other group and that other planet?
So Gary Seven was going to have his own TV show, kind of like a quantum leap type thing, where he was going to travel through time and like solve problems and things like that. So this was meant to be an introduction to those characters in an effort to spin it off into something else. So when you say it's not a Star Trek episode, that's
It's
because
really
it
not.
Effectively wasn't.
It's like the farm episode in the final season of The Office.
Yes. Yep.
Where again, it's like, this feels weird and it just doesn't quite work.
Yeah. Abbie, I didn't get your score for Bread and Circuses. So
my baseline for it was going to be 5, and then the ick factor brought me down to a 4.
Yeah.
Because it was not watchable because of that, which is my like baseline 5. But it wasn't just terrible or like, oh my God, I can't finish this, but I'm being forced to finish it by you two nuts. And so I'll give it a 4.
Forced.
You don't have to finish an episode. You can say that you didn't finish it.
No, I'm not gonna do that. It's like, what do you call it? DNF.
Quitting?
Is that what we call it when we read? Katie does it all the time. She DNFs her books. Do not finish.
I have 3 books today. I've heard her say that. So
Yep. And there's something about that. So All right, so this episode, I 100% agree. It started off super strong. I was with one exception. I had to go back and re-listen to it to say, did they really say this? Just off the cuff, Captain's log. We casually went back in time using the such and such effect to monitor Earth, and
it was the light speed breakaway factor.
Yeah.
just this casual like FYI instead of exploring
Because
the
they've done
galaxy.
it before. It's a callback to a previous episode.
So
But
random.
we have our deflector shields up, so nobody can see us.
Yeah, and then the timing of that was obviously suspect. But I did like that actor who played what's his face 7. I thought he was funny.
Yeah.
I mean, it was. I laughed because the cat thing cracked me up. How they have this like cat fascination in Star Trek. It feels like is like the animal of choice. I say that as I've literally, you can see it. Have a cat.
Yeah, you have a cat that looks almost like Isis. Like,
yeah, he is.
I see white paws, but
yeah, he's very much a kitten who wants to be held. So I thought that was funny. And then they had some funny choices on that. I mean, obviously, once you say that whole thing about the spinoff, it makes complete sense as to why all of a sudden the cat was a human at the end of that episode for a half a second. It was like, okay, yep. But my first comments, and I'll just read what my notes were. We just casually went back in time. Don't worry about it. We do it all the time, just casually. 2, why does the cat sound like a monkey?
So I was looking at some of the trivia for this. They couldn't get a cat to like make the sounds on cue that they wanted. So the lady that did the voice of the computer vocalized, quote, convincing cat sounds.
That is Major Barrett, by the way.
No, she did not.
Voice of the computer?
No, I'm
voice
saying
of
she did
the
not make
computer
convincing
in
cat noises.
Seven's.
Oh, not
the voice of the computer in Seven's apartment.
Got it.
Yeah. So we had monkey cats, which I thought was, it made me laugh numerous times. I did, like I said, I liked that urgency of that guy. It was like, and I kind of wish we'd seen him again in the series, even in a different series. It'd be kind of cool to have that like throwback to them, like as a long nod, being like, yeah, we're from so and so or whatever. I'd be interested to see that throwback. But I did also find it was funny that, was it Gary 7? Is that his name?
Yeah.
Gary 7. Gary 7 had a sonic screwdriver. So,
I've made that same comment too.
So for anybody who doesn't watch Doctor Who, we also have a nod to Doctor Who on this one. Because I'm sorry, he pulled at that sonic screwdriver just like any one of the doctors. Is Gary 7 the Doctor? Is he from Gallifrey?
There are actually like conspiracy theorists that say that Doctor Who and Star Trek take place in the same universe.
I would put forward that is, I mean,
Let me determine
that
it's a multiverse.
He acted very much like a Doctor Who, like a doctor would. He had a companion. It was random. He did random things at the very end. He used his whatever. He was comical, but also like efficient.
No.
Didn't use a gun. Didn't hurt anybody. I'm sorry. He could be the Doctor.
Yep.
Doing a cameo.
No, I love the fact that early in the episode, Spock is standing there holding the cat. Says, "A lovely animal. I find myself strangely drawn to it." It's like
Spock likes cats. Right. And then, I mean, they had some funny characters in this one. So, I mean, it wasn't a great plot by any means. It was like, oh God, we're back on the nose again. We got the missile crisis. You know, he's got to stop the missiles, you know, and obviously they really like talking about military bases and all that kind of stuff. But at the time, I'm pretty sure that's what people cared about. So it was very, you know, relatable to them then, I think. And it was filmed well. The production quality on this one was much higher than the production quality on the previous one. I noticed that. The actress they had for the secretary was interesting. You know, she was a comical character. You know, she wasn't just a throwaway. It was filmed very differently than any of the other ones, in my opinion. It just had a different flavor to the office scenes. It was more bright, open, very much more like a 60s actual show than an earlier Western-y kind of filming to me. So that, what do you call that? Cinematography was different on it, and you could tell. I didn't hate it. I didn't think it was great. I didn't dislike it. I thought it was watchable. I thought it was funny. I mean, we got some comments about the ears that were funny. We've got some comments about the cat. I think it was funny. He was talking to the stupid cat the entire time. It's like, you're really worried about this, aren't you? You know, just funny, lovely things like that that crack me up. Do we see McCoy at all in this episode?
No, I
I
think
was thinking about that. This is
we
our
didn't
first
really
non-McCoy
see
episode.
we didn't really see anybody.
No,
Kirk.
we saw Spock, we saw Kirk, we saw
Yes.
Scotty, we saw Scotty, we saw who was the last one? I don't know. But at any rate, I laughed about the son of screwdriver and I laughed about the monkey cat. And I'll give it a solid 6 because it was more than watchable. I laughed a few times and there wasn't any big yuck factors for me.
Well, this is a Devil's episode then, because we all gave it a 6. Haha, that's not funny. Not funny.
So with this one, it made me think. So I just today finished listening to the Martyr Made podcast series about the Jonestown suicide cult.
Yep.
Super dark story, messed up, but in the podcast series, they went beyond just that day in a South American jungle. And basically, it was like, here's a history of the 60s and 70s in the US. And fucked up time, for lack of any better phrase. Just completely messed up. And just there were all sorts of things going on at that time. There were racial tensions, the Cold War, Vietnam, there were assassinations happening, like all throughout the decade. So, and I mean, they even brought up some of those things in this episode. So looking ahead at other series within the Star Trek universe, I'm curious to see how other series and movies are influenced by the times that they are made. And this is something I think we see it a lot more in season 2 than we did in season 1. There were aspects of season 1 that we saw with, say, the Romulans and the Klingons and things like that when they were introduced, but especially late in season 2, it felt very much like a commentary or whatever on the late 60s, which I didn't realize before listening through this podcast series, like how wild that time actually was.
Yep.
Like that time was insane. And just with what was going on, yeah. So just kind of a random thought there. Like I'm curious to see how these other series that are in the late 80s and early 90s and then the late 90s and early aughts, how those, like, what they pull from their current times, because I think it's natural for shows to pull, even if they're set in a different time or space, they pull from the time that they're created because of they're trying to appeal to their audience. And
I agree.
It's just
what was
interesting.
Another show? Like, I want to know another show at the time that was on at the same time as this, and what was its themes?
I'm
what
not
were some of its episodes like? I'm curious to know if this was matching or tracking something similar. Was it mirroring a different popular show?
I don't know.
Your research, go.
Yeah, I think that's what Aaron's doing. Based
yeah. The top like 10 shows: Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In, Gomer Pyle, Bonanza, Mayberry, RFD, Family Affair, Gunsmoke, Julia, The Dean Martin Show, Here's Lucy, and The Beverly Hillbillies. Then Mission Impossible, Bewitched.
I love Bewitched.
This had a very Bewitched feel to it. Did you catch that?
Yeah, kind of.
Kim and the cat and the secretary. Oh yeah, it was filmed like Bewitched.
Star Trek wasn't in the top 30.
Yeah, probably not at this point.
Yeah. But I mean, this was the time of so the previous season, 67, 68, the top show was the Andy Griffith Show, the Lucy Show, Gomer Pyle, Gunsmoke. So I mean, that's kind of the era we were in.
I've not watched enough of those shows to really analyze what elements that they were taking from current events and things like that at the time.
Yeah.
And either commenting on them or
Well, yeah, I haven't paid attention to much of those, but again, I think some of those are almost appealing to an earlier time. Gunsmoke, isn't that like an older Western type? And the Andy Griffith Show, isn't that taking place in like the 50s? So almost appealing back to a less chaotic time. Given all the stuff going on in society at that time, which again, listening to that, it feels like over the last handful of years, things have just been insane in the world. But then you hear what was going on in the late 60s and early 70s. It's like, oh man, anything we're seeing today seems relatively tame compared to the things they had going on back then. It was just insane. I don't know where I was going with that, other than there were some stories that we saw throughout the first two seasons that were very timeless. I mean, you could see them, and yes, they were dated, but it was a production quality issue, different way of making TV, different way of storytelling, but the stories themselves were a bit timeless. I feel like a lot less of that, especially late in season 2.
Yeah.
I mean, she, the lady, I don't know, I didn't recall what her name was, but she even said, we wonder if we're going to be alive when we're 30. I mean, I think that was something that people genuinely feared at that time.
It's the Cold War, it's the nuclear arms race.
Vietnam is ramping up.
Ramping down, by the way. I didn't realize this because I watched a different thing of like, oh, the Vietnam War, starting in the late 50s. And I went, when did the Vietnam run from? 1955 until 73. So it was in a full ramp down at that point.
I had no idea it lasted that long. I mean, I guess I did at one point. I passed history, I think, at one point,
I don't know that I ever knew that, but
I could be wrong, but I thought most of U.S. involvement was like after 65, because that's if they're looking back to when it all started with the French and Vietnam, but I'm not a Vietnam War expert.
I'm looking at literally just the Wikipedia article that ran from 1955 to 75, and you're right, that could include, all different parts of the conflict, right? But
quick, get into Wikipedia, change the information while he's reading it, just to mess with him.
No, we entered it in 1965.
Yeah.
So this is the halfway point.
Yeah.
Still, they're feeling it at this point. Their kids are.
Sure.
Their kids are being conscripted.
Yeah, you've got that.
Everyone knows someone who's been impacted by it at this point.
No.
It's been going long enough. Yeah.
Yeah.
I found it interesting. The only other comment I really had on this one was they made a comment about how primitive the technology was of the time. Because he said, it's crazy how people can live their lives with this amount of primitive technology, is what he says to his cat. And I was like, that's such an interesting commentary, being that it's in the time the story was written, that someone wrote that. And I was like, what does that mean? That would be like me saying, it's such a primitive time to be alive right now. How are we surviving with our technology as it is today? Because I'm not like I can see what's going forward in the future. That's me right now telling myself in society how primitive we are.
And I think we will always, to a certain extent, look back and think that, right?
Look back, though, but not current.
Yeah.
They're saying that as a current, or are they just looking with such expectation to the future?
Oh, for sure it's expectation, right?
But the way he said it seemed almost more like judgment on where they are now.
But that theme comes back later in one of the movies, too, is kind of like an offhand comment.
So while I was saying how this seemed very of the time and of the moment, I find it interesting on the flip side, some of the conversations we've also had with these episodes, like the Ultimate Computer last week. In a way, the same conversations are still being had today. They were talking about how tech basically evolved faster than society and faster than people. So it's like we have those conversations. Those conversations are being had today with the technological advancements that we've seen, and some people arguing that it's advancing faster than we can adapt to the technology, and seeing adverse effects of various things, just societally or even personally. But I just, again, find it interesting that 50, 60 years removed, we're still having similar conversations about some of that technological advancement, and then thinking how far beyond where they were in the late 1960s.
Yeah, it just makes me think of a different video that I watched recently of is Neil deGrasse Tyson, and he was on Colbert. I forget who asked him the question, but like the question was, what is the question that most excites you right now? And his response was that one of the question, the concept that most excites him is the idea of, there are just some things that human beings will never understand, and where is that line? How do you get so close to that line but have no idea that you've hit that wall? And so I think it's similar to this. And the example that he uses is, you can walk up to like a chimpanzee and talk to them, and you can like use words and talk at them, and they have no idea what you're talking about, but they share 99% of our DNA. So they've hit this point where they've kind of evolutionarily or wherever hit the point where they don't understand anymore, or they can't understand anymore, and we've continued on. And where's that point for us? And so I think when you start talking about like technology transcending where humans are, right? Where's that point where technology in a lot of ways exceeds what humans are capable of?
Mm-hmm.
Is that the step in evolution?
That makes me think about the crickets we have. Because I literally just like, Aaron, what if we're just like human crickets slowly being fed to something, we just don't know it?
Right.
We're just happily going about our lives, eating our lettuce and just doing our thing and singing our songs, and until we get plucked. Like, I think your response, Aaron, was, well, if it is, we don't know about it. Move on, keep singing.
Yeah. Ignorance is bliss.
Mm-hmm.
So I was looking through a little bit of trivia on this episode, and while we sometimes want to say Gene Roddenberry, not a great writer, I would say, since he was a writer on this episode, I would say this bit of writing, and it's a decision in a name, is really interesting when you think about this, and what could have been if this had been turned into the spin-off series they wanted. So do you know what the girl's name was in this episode?
I don't know that I ever caught it.
It was Roberta Lincoln, which is a feminine version of Robert Lincoln. And Robert Todd Lincoln was a lawyer, politician, businessman who had a long career and was present at or near the violent deaths of 3 U.S. presidents, including his father, Abe Lincoln, James Garfield, and William McKinley.
Oh.
And in the Assignment Earth spin-off series, Gary Seven and Roberta Lincoln would have been in the business of rescuing people from assassination. So clever use of names.
Yeah.
and I I don't know what made me think of it earlier, but I was thinking, um, spoiler here for the game BioShock, which has been out for a long time, but the premise of BioShock is kind of this, I think, bad take on a libertarian type society where all of that goes. But the guy you're working with through the first chunk of the game is named Andrew Ryan, which is kind of a spin on Ayn Rand, and kind of her philosophy. And then it takes a hard turn where he's a bad guy who betrays you and all of that. So that's where the spoiler is for a game that's been out for like
Man, I was going to start
12
that game
years.
tomorrow. So
I
thanks
know.
a lot.
Well, it's fine. It's still a fantastic game. But again, very clever how when you know the names that they can use can tell they can tell a lot without saying a lot, which I find interesting with a name like Roberta Lincoln. And
Yeah.
granted, I didn't make that connection, but hearing that the connection is there, it's like, oh man, that's kind of cool. Or maybe it's on accident. Who knows?
No, I doubt that's an accident.
No. So yeah, I found that interesting. When I was looking through the trivia, though, apparently that actress Terry Garr had such a horrible time filming it and refused to basically talk about Star Trek ever again in her career.
Really? She looked
Yeah.
familiar. Did she go on to do anything else
Um,
significant?
yes. You may have seen her in Young Frankenstein.
That's what it is. That's why she's familiar.
Yeah.
Yes.
He also kind of looks a little bit like Lisa Kudrow.
A little bit, yeah.
Oh,
But
there.
Young Frankenstein
Oh,
is
yep. She is also hang on, I thought I had seen this. She is Phoebe Abbott Sr. So she plays Phoebe's mom on Friends.
There it is. I was like, she looks like Phoebe.
Yeah. So,
But the Young
yeah,
Frankenstein thing, that's totally where I've seen her before because I
yep.
love the movie.
Apparently she was also in Dumb and Dumber. But yeah, apparently she had such a bad experience on it that she pretty much never talked about it again.
Does it say what her bad experience was? Like what?
This trivia from IMDb says she had such an unpleasant time filming this episode, she refused to ever talk about Star Trek again. Although she did do an interview with Starlog magazine many years later, which she was very disparaging of both the show and its fans. Apparently there were fights over the length of her skirt. Gene Roddenberry wanted it shortened, and she was not on board. Yeah.
Because it didn't seem like it's not like it was a particularly like intense role to film. So I was
Yeah.
curious, what would drive that? So some of that, like that makes complete sense, right?
But yeah, I thought it was funny though that she made very disparaging comments of both the show and its fans.
Yes.
I don't know when that interview was or what was said. But yeah, kind of funny.
It's probably quoted in the Leonard Nimoy book, I Am Not Spock.
Yeah.
Did you guys catch Scotty's voice from Mission Control? I thought I caught it, and I was like, that sounded like Scotty. Did you guys catch it?
No, I didn't, but he always does random voices.
He was fun.
Now, maybe you guys can explain to me if I missed something, but what was the point of the cat? Did the cat serve any purpose to the story other than shape-shifting into the woman at the end?
I mean,
and then back into the
companion.
cat.
It did distract people. It attacked like one security guard so he can get his thing out.
There it is.
Just the doctor always has a companion.
It was a interesting sidekick that was not well utilized.
I did have the thought as soon as the cat came on, I wrote down the galaxy is on Orion's belt.
See, that's not so.
And I was hoping that something would come up where the cat actually had a factor in the story, and then at the end it didn't, other than just that funny line of like, what's with that?
I was expecting at
Just
some
my
point
cat.
the cat was going to lose all its hair and get renamed Mr. Bigglesworth. That was what rolled through my head.
When did the Cat from Outer Space movie come out? Just curious. Like, someone Google that.
The cat
can't.
Wasn't that the cat's paw episode that we watched earlier in the
No,
season? That
there
was
was a
so
I
very
believe
good.
there's a popular movie in the 60s. Maybe it was the 70s called The Cat from Outer Space. Disney did it, and I'm wondering if they're kind of playing off of that a little bit, where it was literally like
1978.
Oh, never mind, wasn't that? So I
So-
got nothing then. Other than Spock likes cats. Apparently.
Spock likes cats.
Did you like how the Vulcan nerve pinch did not work on
Yeah,
Gary 7?
tried really
Makes some
hard, but
sense. But he's a human, so why
he's
wouldn't it
not
work?
a human.
They said he was human.
They said that
They
he
said he was
registered
human.
as human, but it was almost too perfect.
No,
he
they
said that-
explained
he
it.
said
was
that he
taken
was
he was from Earth generations earlier. They brought them to the new planet and raised them and trained them.
Okay.
He was from like the
Earth.
1960s Earth. But they just played it all off as like they know things beyond what you will ever understand.
Yeah. So
And like, yeah, you don't see the planet. It is hidden.
You know, that
Like,
whole
well, we don't
concept,
see
though,
anything there. And even Spock was just like, yeah, they said it's hidden. We should not expect to see
Mhm.
something.
Let's
It's
bring
hidden.
all of our nerd round here, all the way around. So this is not the first series, or it is the first. Another one picked it up where you can just explain, like, hey, something standard like a nerve pinch or a muscle knock doesn't work for some external factor. So it also happened in the Firefly movie. Remember that one? The guy smacks him in the neck, or is it in the back. Remember? So it paralyzes them, so they fall forward when he's at the.
Since I watched that
So
movie.
the point is, Mal was supposed to fall on his own sword, and he didn't because he's like, I got shrapnel in there. That move didn't work on me.
Yeah.
So who knows? Maybe this dude's got shrapnel in his shoulder, which is why
Maybe.
Spock can't do the nerve pinch. I laughed at this trivia piece. I found that Mr. Seven flashed his National Security Agency credentials. And apparently at the time, that was like the worst kept government secret. It technically did not acknowledge, it wasn't acknowledged until 25 years after that, but everyone knew that it was a thing.
Yeah.
That cracks me up. So NSA existed then, but no one knew, but they knew, wink, wink.
Yeah. There's a long history of the NSA. It's another great book that I can't remember the title of that basically traces its history back to like late World War I, early World War II signals intelligence and how it evolved into the NSA. And yeah, the most not clandestine agency ever. I don't know that I had a whole lot else on this episode.
I don't really either. So what is your overall ranking on season 2?
So my overall ranking, so if I
not saying calculate your average, I'm saying we'll find out what your average is and just see if I mean, I'm sure you've looked at it, but what your gut says, if you were to put a number like we do on all the episodes, what's your number on season 2?
5.
I was gonna say 5. Because you got some real poopers.
There were some good episodes.
But you've got some good episodes
Shocker,
too to average them out.
Shocker here. I said 6. I thought season 1 was a 7. I thought season 1 was good. I'm putting this one as okay. Yeah, it definitely wasn't as good as season 1. I thought it was an okay season, which I think if we average out the ratings, mine's probably fairly close to a 6. Had a rough start, picked up as the season went along, and then some stronger episodes towards the end, the last 2 notwithstanding. And yeah, I thought it was an okay season. It's one of those seasons where I'm not shocked to know that it got canceled.
Mhm.
Also not shocked that there was enough of a fan base to get it brought back.
Mhm.
And then also not shocked that after season 3, they were just like, get this shit out of here.
Yeah.
So I'm not holding out hope for season 3 to have that much good in it, but I can see why the network was just like, we're done. Why there were avid fans of it, but then why, and so they brought it back. And I can also speculate why it didn't get picked up for a 4th season.
So do you want to know what your average actually was?
Yeah.
6.27.
All right.
Close.
Yeah, my gut was right in line with what
Yeah.
I
Abby,
what I
you
said.
said 5 for the season?
My average was higher, wasn't it?
About 5.58.
Ooh, closer to a 6.
Mm-hmm. So I also said a 5.
It's within the 5 range. I think I was pretty good on that guess.
I also said 5 in my average, 5.96. So I missed it by a point.
So really, this was the devil's season, because if we round up on the actual ratings we gave,
Yep,
the 666,
666.
really the beast's season.
Yeah. No,
Yeah, I thought it was okay, which then makes it so it's like there's not a whole lot to recap or
it really
say,
isn't. There
because
were a couple of good episodes, but not that many.
there were a bunch of, when I just looked through, there were some good there were a decent number of good episodes, there were a bunch of stinkers, and then there were just a bunch of okay episodes. I
Yep.
mean, there were some really bad episodes this season. Cat's Paw, I think, is the one I had rated the worst.
I think that is the worst of all.
Now I know that's not the lowest rating anyone gave, but there were just a lot of episodes that just they weren't, at least in my mind, weren't so bad that they were just unwatchable or awful or anything, but they were just eh.
So
There
Cat's
were a
Paw
number of good episodes.
Cat's Paw is our lowest rated episode of the show so far.
Yeah. I mean, lowest individual rating. I know there were some lower lower ratings than that one on individual episodes.
Well, I mean,
But
I gave it a 2. You gave
yeah,
it a 4. Abby gave it a 5. It averages out to 3.6.
yeah,
Nothing
it's
is lower
fair.
than.
Yeah. I guess I just meant like,
Oh,
yeah,
like
that one.
4,
You had some 2s. I think that was the lowest I had, and that was a 4. But I mean, there were a bunch of 5s. On second watching, I was convinced that the Trouble with Tribbles was an 8. Not convinced by your insanity that it's a 9. I think that's boosted up by how shitty some of the other episodes around it
No,
are.
disagree, but that's okay.
But yeah, just I looked through my notebook, and it's just a handful of 7s and a whole bunch of 6s.
Well, when I go back and I look at mine of 26 episodes in season 2, I only rated 4 episodes an 8 or above.
Yeah.
Which is shocking.
I think I just had a whole bunch of 7s. So
You did
I had 1 8, maybe. I had a couple where I could have gone 8 but leaned 7.
Yep. You had a lot
Yeah,
of 7s, that's for sure.
yeah. I just had a lot of 7s, episodes that I thought were good, and then a bunch of episodes that I thought were just okay. And then yeah, there were some real stinkers in there too. Yeah, and
all over the place. I mean, I don't think there was hardly a score she didn't give. She's got 1s, she's got 2s, she's got 3s, she's got a 10 in there. It's all the numbers.
I had 2. Looking through my notes, I had 2 8s. but just not as good as particularly the second half of season one. I thought had a lot of strong episodes. It was where they hit their stride. And then it feels like they kind of went away from some of that in season two. The episodes where they really stuck with it were some of the better episodes where they had, it was either like the Ultimate Computer had a very philosophical discussion, I thought, but also hit a lot of that hero's journey and having to go into the unknown and figure out how are we going to survive this. The trouble with Tribbles, what I think was great about that was that you had the whole crew there. And they
Right.
had a lot of episodes this season. I mean, Sulu was off filming some other movies, so he wasn't there for a lot of it, but they had a lot of episodes that just didn't use everybody. And I think the episodes where they did use everybody were probably some of the better episodes of the season. I mean, I felt like the season started good with was it Amok Time
Yep.
with
We all collectively
learning a
like.
lot about Vulcan background, and there was some really good stuff in that episode, in the world building and the lore. But after that they kind of went away from a lot of that side of it, where had they continued building out the world like that instead of just random episodes that weren't tied to anything else, maybe it would have been a better season, but I don't know.
I think it's interesting too, just kind of looking at some of these episodes. We got a lot of, like, if we look at the back half of season one, a lot of different writers
Mm-hmm.
that we don't necessarily see at all in season two, with the exception of Gene Kuhn, who we know is a fixture in Star Trek, and then DC Fontana, who has, I mean, she wrote a lot of stuff and continued for quite a long time, even after the original series. And so I think it's interesting that we don't really see any of those writers, like the ones that we really liked in the second half of season one, at all in season two, with the exception of Gene Kuhn and DC Fontana. In those episodes, I won't say all of them, but many of them have much higher ratings for us than the rest. I think there's a few ones in there that are kind of stinkers. Bread and Circuses was Gene Roddenberry and Gene Kuhn, so there again is where that kind of falls down a little bit. But like DC Fontana wrote The Ultimate Computer. We really like that episode. She also wrote Journey to Babel, which I liked, and you guys are kind of okay-ish on, right? It is interesting that it's almost like they for whatever reason moved away from some of the writers that were making the show the way we liked it, right?
Yeah. And I mean, you can see by the fact that it got canceled that it didn't necessarily work. Yeah, I mean, I guess try different things, but who knows? Maybe they ran out of ideas. I don't know. And this is where I will be very interested to read that Making of Star Trek book.
Great.
I'm probably not going to wait until we're done with season 3 in the animated series to read it.
I don't
But
think you need to wait anymore.
no, I think we've probably hit the main the bulk of what's covered in the book.
Yeah.
So I'll fudge my plan a little bit here and be open to other information. But yeah, I'm these episodes, I don't find them quite as much of a chore as Abbie might, but it still is like, okay, I'm ready to move on to the good stuff, or just
Yep.
move on to something new. But I'm still enjoying it. Even though I only thought it was an okay season, I'm still enjoying doing this and watching them, talking about them. It's been a lot of fun. And yeah, plan to continue. But yeah, looking forward to kind of moving on to what else Star Trek has to offer. But Yeah, in a way, it's like, okay, I've enjoyed the original series way more than I thought I would. Um, through two seasons. In part, I can't believe I've now watched two full seasons of a Star Trek show and the original series at that, and actually enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Um, so
I found a lot more episodes that I enjoyed than I thought I would.
yeah,
Or like episodes I know I watched in the past that I thought I didn't like, but then when I actually sat down and watched them, it's like, oh, this is actually really interesting. Um, where I either
yeah,
didn't pay enough attention or maybe I was too young to understand like the deeper meaning.
yeah.
Or when you're younger, you
Well,
like the more action-packed stuff generally, right? Not none of the philosophical like
yeah.
blah.
Well, it's also weird because you can't really quantify the difference between watching it in a way because it's on and
Mhm.
because you like it, and watching it semi-critically.
Yeah.
I mean, because we're deliberately and thoughtfully watching these episodes, which is a different experience than
Mhm.
I'm a kid, I'm watching TV and not really thinking much of it, but just kind of it's different than just being along for the ride.
Yeah.
While I'm trying to just be along for the ride and want to enjoy all of these episodes, it's still a bit of like, well, it's a different experience when you're sitting there with a notebook and actively paying attention to what you're watching.
Yeah. I agree.
But I've found it so far to be very enjoyable.
Yeah.
And
So
I haven't seen any episode yet that I'm just like, I cannot finish this.
they're very, very, I mean, as someone who's seen them all, there's very, very few,
Yeah.
and even most of them I would power through and probably finish. There's a couple that, yeah. I think there's one or two that I just turned off because Ellie was in the room and like this is such a bad episode, and I don't want her to watch this because it's not appropriate.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Taking advantage of slave women is appropriate? Isn't appropriate? You sure?
It's
I'm pretty sure.
historical.
Yeah.
Oh,
So are we doing the movie next? Is that what's
yeah. So, yeah, I think we will watch the first movie next, and
okay?
then we'll get into season 3.
Okay.
Um, and then we'll take a break in season 3 to watch Wrath of Khan when we get to that at the theater, and then
Yep.
continue season 3 animated series, and
Got a
then
bunch of movies.
jump into the handful of movies for a couple of weeks at that point, and then next gen.
Okay.
And I do on my like my spreadsheet is not complete, but I do have in there whenever we reach wherever they are in 1999 in December, when we reach that point watching through the series, we will watch Galaxy Quest and see how I appreciate it differently, having watched that much Star Trek.
99.
Yep.
That is that DS9 era? Because I think Next Gen ended in 97, right?
It's probably Voyager.
It's DS9 or Voyager or at the same time because there's a 2 season overlap. Okay. It's gotta be Voyager then because Next Gen ended in 94. So
Deep Space
99.
Nine went to 99, Voyager went to 01.
Yep. And
So
so there's
yeah,
a 2 season
mid
overlap.
Voyager.
So yeah, end of DS9, second season of Voyager.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's right.
So um so yeah, it'll be midway through, partway through season 6 of Voyager, we'll watch Galaxy Quest, which we did watch a few months ago, after we'd already started watching through the original series, and Yeah, still a very enjoyable movie.
This is a great movie. You'll get no argument from me there. It's been a while since I've watched it, but
Yeah.
I do.
Yeah, I already got more from it after watching a handful of episodes of the original series
Yeah.
compared to having just seen only that. But yeah, so I guess doesn't seem like we have much of a recap on season 2 because
Don't
it
think there's
wasn't much of a season. It was just kind of there. Um, so yeah. Well, there you go. 2 seasons. I can't believe it. I've said it before, and I'm sure I'll keep saying it. I cannot believe not only how much Star Trek I've watched, but how much I have genuinely enjoyed it. I never thought I would be a Trekkie, yet here I am. I began this project with the goal of understanding why people love this series. Why a show from the late 1960s would still matter today in the mid 2020s. And I think I get it, at least somewhat. I don't know if I can entirely quantify it. There are those timeless elements of the hero's journey. There are great characters. The show is more than just spaceships and aliens. I can see why people would have fallen in love with the show, whether when it was first on or later in syndication. But I can also see why the show was canceled. It's begun to feel like they were running out of ideas, and they couldn't necessarily put enough of a twist on old ideas to make them feel fresh and new. Unless season 3 holds some major surprises, the series feels like it peaked late in season 1 with a bunch of fantastic episodes, particularly The City on the Edge of Forever and Space Seed. Season 2 had some gems, but on the whole was weaker than season 1. But I can still see why fans loved it and petitioned to get it back. With that kind of support, it's easy to see why the network would give the show another shot. Then again, given the trajectory of season 2, I anticipate that I won't be surprised with season 3, knowing that it too was finally canceled, this time for good. But this show, which I felt had a good first season, I think I gave it a 7, and an okay second season, I think I gave it a 6, and I would anticipate the third season will be yet another step down. This show has remained popular, even the original series, to today. Movies, more shows. It's truly, as Spock would say, fascinating. Given our recording schedule, I have watched a few of these episodes only once, but many I've now seen twice or more, but in close succession, basically watching the same episode twice in 1 week. I am curious how these episodes will resonate with me if I revisit them in a few years. Will I feel nostalgic toward the stories and the characters? The episodes I maybe didn't care as much for, will those grow on me? Will it be like my experience with the movie The Big Lebowski? The first time I saw that movie, I didn't really get it. It felt strange. It was funny enough, but really an odd movie. But then we would quote lines from it, and I would recall how funny it really was. Then the next time I watched it, I enjoyed it so much more. Is that how Star Trek was experienced moving into the 1970s? Did people remember a show that was maybe a bit better than okay at the time, but then saw it in syndication and had a newfound appreciation for it? Whether it was nostalgia or picking up on some of the depth? I do know the 70s bring us the animated series and eventually the motion picture, so there was still something there. Regardless, I am still very much enjoying this, even the not so good episodes. Now, a few programming notes for upcoming episodes. I think I've mentioned it before, but I'll mention it again. My initial plan was to watch everything in broadcast and release order. Obviously, I messed that up with The Cage, so how true to the plan do I really need to stay now? But really, it's my podcast. I'm going to do what I want. We recorded these episodes back in late 2023. Around this time, Abbie and I had the chance to go see a special screening of Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan, followed by a Q&A with William Shatner. Before going to see Star Trek II, I figured I should probably watch Star Trek I. So next week we will discuss Star Trek the Motion Picture and then get started on the original series Season 3. And with that, I want to thank you again for spending your time with us. If you enjoy what we're doing, please leave a rating and a review. We really appreciate it. For Abbie and Nate, this is Aaron reminding you to never give up, never surrender. Well, yeah, they tried to take on Kirk. That in and of itself would be dumb.